Here is a catch-up/explainer on what's going on with the Canada Post Strike 2025. The story of the Canada Post Strike in September 2025 is about much more than undelivered mail. It captures a decades-long tension between financial survival, universal service, and labor rights. Right now, postal workers across Canada are on a nationwide strike. Mail and parcels have ground to a halt after the federal government ordered sweeping reforms at Canada Post. The reforms include phasing out door-to-door mail delivery over the next decade, closing some post offices, and restructuring routes to cut costs. Ottawa argues the corporation is effectively insolvent, pointing to a record loss of over $400 million in the second quarter of 2025 and more than $4 billion in losses since 2018. It has already lent Canada Post $1 billion, but has set a 45-day deadline for a credible restructuring plan. The union, CUPW, sees the reforms as an attack. They warn of job losses, more reliance on temporary and part-time work, and a decline in service quality. Businesses, meanwhile, are anxious about the strike's timing, especially in the run-up to the holiday season, with fears of lost sales echoing earlier strikes. To understand how Canada got here, it helps to step back. The modern history of Canada Post labor relations began in 1965, when an illegal wildcat strike secured public sector workers the right to collective bargaining. In the 1970s, long strikes secured job security as automation spread. In 1978, the union famously defied a back-to-work law, leading to the jailing of its president, Jean-Claude Parrott. In 1981, another strike won paid maternity leave, a first in the federal sector. More recently, in 2011, rotating strikes triggered a lockout, and in 2018, Parliament once again legislated postal workers back to work. Just last year, in 2024, the courts dismissed the union's constitutional challenge to that law. The September 2025 strike is the latest flashpoint in this long-running pattern. Other countries have had to rethink what a postal service should look like in an era of shrinking letter mail and booming parcels. In the United Kingdom, regulators have relaxed standards for non-priority letters while preserving fast service for first-class mail and investing heavily in parcel delivery. In the United States, Congress tackled structural costs instead of cutting service, passing a reform act that ended the burdensome pre-funding of retiree health benefits and guaranteed 6-day delivery. In Australia, the government shifted letter delivery to every second business day, freeing resources to expand the parcel network. And in New Zealand, urban letter delivery was reduced to 3 days a week, while rural and remote areas were protected by a formal agreement with government. These examples suggest a few lessons for Canada. First, define what the universal service really means. Daily or near-daily parcels and time-sensitive letters, but slower delivery for bulk or non-priority mail. Second, fix structural finances, such as pension and health liabilities, not just routes. Third, protect rural, remote, and Indigenous communities with tailored standards. Fourth, find a labor pathway that avoids endless cycles of back-to-work laws, perhaps with credible mediation or transition guarantees. And finally, phase changes in gradually, with clear timelines so that the public and businesses can adapt. Postal workers across Canada have walked off the job, triggering a national strike. During the strike, no mail or parcels will be processed or delivered, and no new items will be accepted. This is the second time in the past year Canada's postal services have come to a halt due to labor disputes. The trigger, the government, which is Canada Post's sole shareholder, has ordered sweeping changes to the service, including the elimination of door-to-door delivery over time. The government has given Canada Post 45 days to implement a restructuring plan. Key players and their positions. Government/Canada Post. The federal government argues the postal service is in an existential crisis. It says Canada Post has lost over $4 billion Canadian dollars since 2018, and in the most recent quarter recorded its worst ever quarterly loss, $407 million Canadian dollars. The government has already lent Canada Post $1 billion Canadian dollars, but insists bailouts are unsustainable in the long term. As part of cost-cutting and modernization measures, the government wants to end door-to-door mail delivery and close a number of post offices. They also propose reworking delivery routes and labor arrangements, for instance, shifting from fixed routes and full-time staff to potentially more flexible or part-time models to reduce labor costs. The union describes the changes as an attack on workers, warning that the shift will reduce full-time jobs, increase reliance on temporary or part-time work, and undermine the quality of service. Negotiations have dragged on for over 20 months with no resolution. The union says Canada Post has repeatedly avoided real bargaining and has leaned on government fiat as a way to impose changes. Service to Canadians, especially rural/remote/Indigenous communities. The government frames the postal service as essential, especially for people in rural, remote, or Indigenous communities. Changing or cutting door-to-door delivery could disproportionately impact these populations. Business groups warn the strike will cause a massive disruption, especially just ahead of the holiday season. The previous postal strike cost small businesses about 1 billion Canadian dollars in lost sales. Labor and fairness. Workers fear job losses, erosion of benefits, and a shift toward more precarious jobs, temporary, part-time. The evolving nature of mail/parcels and competition. Traditional letter mail has sharply declined. It peaked in 2006 and is being outpaced by private courier services, which often operate more flexibly and cheaply. The financial pressure is part of the justification for structural change. Precedent for public services and public corporations. The government's approach, leveraging its ownership rights to enforce sweeping change, raises questions about how far a government can go in restructuring a crown corporation without more negotiation or oversight. Challenges and friction points. Financial versus social mission. The core tension is between making Canada Post financially sustainable versus preserving its role as a universal public mail service. Implementation risk. Phasing out door-to-door delivery. Shutting post offices, remapping routes. All of this is complex and politically sensitive. Public backlash. Many Canadians are attached to postal services. The shift may provoke significant public resistance. Labor resistance. The union is strongly opposed, and a full strike halts operations entirely. Timing. The 45-day window for restructuring is aggressive. Further delays or litigation are likely. What might happen next? Mediation or arbitration. The federal government says there are mediators available to assist the negotiations. Legal challenges. The union could challenge government orders or restructuring moves in court or via labor boards. Partial or phased changes to reduce shock. Some changes might come gradually or with exemptions, e.g. in rural or Indigenous areas. Political pressure and public opinion, backlash, or electoral consequences could force adjustments. Further strikes or lockouts. If negotiations stall or one side pushes too hard, further industrial action is possible.